Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I wanted to take some time to not necessarily gloat, but definitely talk about the issues with Google Stadia and the resulting reviews that have been coming out today for the new cloud gaming service that is apparently set to launch tomorrow. And I've spoken about Stadia in the past, so longtime viewers will know that I do already have a bit of a personal bias against Stadia and against cloud gaming in general. Yes, I've said that the future of gaming will be heavily cloud-focused. We've seen that with digital distribution, and we've seen it more with the ever-increasing reliance on subscription model systems such as Origin Access and Origin Access Premier, along with Xbox Play Anywhere. And PlayStation has its own subscription model, and we'll continue to see more and more of these in the future. And as an extension of that, cloud gaming was just simply going to become the next thing. Stadia is a natural extension of that mentality, and it is the first major foray into gaming from Google, which I have also expressed some doubts in that regard because this is Google after all, and expecting them to release a crafted and well-polished cloud platform is not unlike asking Activision to be more pro-consumer. They simply don't have it in them to pull it off. I also have discussed how I'm not a fan of gamers being forced to only buy their games through Stadia, and most likely not being able to download their games for offline play. Especially considering during the Reddit AMA in July of this year, that very question was asked, and the Google representative pulled a quick two-step and dodged the question completely while talking about how great cloud gaming is, how you will be able to download only your metadata, meaning your save files, and how everyone will love it. And this threw up an immediate Danger Will Robinson warning bells in my mind. Now, in my previous video, I discussed my concerns about being locked into a subscription service in order to retain access to your games, which I don't think I phrased quite properly in that video, as I had many people reminding me that the base version of Stadia is free, so there's no permanent subscription required. So let me be clear in that regard. Even if you are going with the free model, any games you purchase will only be available for play through the Stadia service, and there will be no option or ability to download your games for offline play. This is not a good thing for consumers, as the concept of cloud gaming itself is in its extreme infancy in this regard. There are a great many more concerns than simply what I've talked about before, and as a result, if you end up having a negative experience with Stadia and wish to retain your games to play locally, you will have no ability to do so. You want to play the game, you have to deal with Stadia's system. And Google does this in order to enforce platform and distribution exclusivity on their system. The problem is the writing was on the wall, and while I did urge extreme caution with Stadia, or really any cloud gaming service, there's one aspect that I haven't discussed outside of Twitter, and that is the simple fact that most games require a certain amount of responsiveness in order to not drive the player absolutely insane, and responsiveness is due to two key factors: latency and lag. Well, one thing most people don't consider is we are already dealing with latency issues with our current input devices. However, that latency is a fairly static quantity in that regard and mostly not noticeable. Once you add in the requirements of the internet, it doesn't matter the amount of bandwidth you have outside of resolution and frame rate. It matters the amount of input lag and increased latency that will be incurred as a result of that input command being sent from your computer or device over the internet to Google's data center, and then the amount of time it takes to process that command and display the results on your screen. And this is an issue that Stadia has clearly not overcome, as we are seeing with current reviews such as this one from the Washington Post, in which they showcase that even over gigabit fiber with a 2 millisecond latency through speedtest.net, granted not the greatest speed testing site out there, but that's beside the point, there was an extreme and noticeable lag to the point where playing any game on a PC is extremely difficult to do, laughably so in fact. They also stated that this was present within multiple games, and the lag differed so greatly that it was impossible for the player to adapt, while also noting that the lag was less noticeable on mobile. Now, there could be a couple of reasons for that, but first, and fair warning, there will be a little bit of tech talk here, I want to talk to everyone a bit about latency and what it means in this regard. Many people will simply go to speedtest.net and say, oh look, I have a latency of just a few milliseconds, it won't be a problem at all. But there's something you have to remember when dealing with a site like speedtest.net. When you are going there to measure your speed and latency, the system will automatically pair you with a responding server that is geographically closest to you and as a result, the ping in milliseconds will be pretty low most of the time. In that Washington Post video, they showed a 2 millisecond ping, which is fantastic. But again, it was probably to the geographically closest responding system, which was probably right there within the city, most likely no more than a few dozen miles away. But when you are dealing with specific data centers like Google, latency becomes a much more prevalent issue, as those data centers will most likely not be geographically close to your location. And one of the reasons why this becomes more prevalent is due to the number of hops involved. You have to remember, when you're out on the internet, it's not just some magical thing. Internet service providers must hand off traffic from system to system in order to get you to the site or service you're trying to get to. Now, say you had the best case scenario where your ISP has a straight shot to the data center you're trying to reach. Then from your computer or device, you would be dealing with just a few hops. From your system to your router, from your router to your ISP center, then from your ISP center to the data center's firewall. That would be best case scenario, and for each additional hop, there is an increase in latency. But chances are no one will live in that best case scenario. Now, let's take a look at what happens when I trace the number of hops needed from my system just to get to Google.com from my location, and you'll see that there were a total of 9 hops with a combined total round trip time, which is time to send the packet out and receive it back, of about 102 milliseconds. Now that's only 1/10 of a second, which is fine for a website, but when you factor in a system processing live input commands and then displaying them on a visual medium that is then being transmitted back, and that latency-induced lag will be increased, which is, in actuality, the issue that is causing all of these reviews, and it is a problem that Google, I don't believe, is able to overcome. Oh sure, they trotted out this absolutely asinine concept that they're calling negative latency, which is nothing more than buzzwords in order to counter people with legitimate concerns in order to get people to sign up for the damn thing. But negative latency, as they call it, will implement a few tricks, such as rapidly increasing frame rate to help counter the effect, and more importantly, machine learning. Yes, as it was stated back in early October, Google plans to make use of machine learning to predict your input commands in order to reduce the effects of lag, but that apparently won't be ready for another 2 years, to say nothing of how well Google handles machine learning algorithms already. As a result of all of this, cloud gaming, while it sounds great in concept, will be inherently exceptionally difficult, if not well nigh impossible, to implement well enough to create a good gameplay experience. Oh, and the reason why the cellular device didn't experience as much lag for the Washington Post, well, it may very well be because that is a completely separate ISP with a completely separate backend, and quite possibly, it didn't have as many hops to make. So, what have we learned from Google Stadia so far from all of the reviews today? Well, we know that they are attempting to create platforms and distribution exclusivity, much like we have seen the console industry be forced to deal with for many a year. No ability to download your purchase games for off-platform play. That Google plans on using algorithms to resolve an issue that is caused by infrastructure and the very internet itself, and that the system is inherently flawed and a subpar gaming experience as a result. And now, as I have avoided gloating up until this point, I'm going to, shall we say, borrow a bit of a clip from the Rageaholic that sums up my feelings quite perfectly to play us off.
Fuck you, I was right! Fuck you, I was right! Fuck you, I was right!
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. I was right, and I'll see you again next time.